France 24. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. This is the France 24 debate. We're looking at the fallout from one of the most determined and hardline groups in Syria's opposition, pledging its allegiance to Al-Qaeda, the jihadist Al-Nusra Front. With us to talk about it from London, Abdel Bari Atwan, managing editor of Quds al-Arabi. In Beirut, Rania Abouzeid, Middle East correspondent for Time magazine, just back from Syria. Elias, Warde, member of the Syrian National Council and of Syrian Christians for Democracy. French political scientist Pierre Berthelot, and we're pleased to be joined for the second part of our discussion on the border between Turkey and Syria, the Turkish town of Kilis, by Neistat, who is with us on the day that Human Rights Watch has put out a report condemning shelling on the part of the Syrian government, airstrikes on the part of the Syrian government. Anna, let me begin with you. The news that has come out with the Al-Nusra pledging its allegiance to Al-Qaeda, is this basically going to mean that the West is going to stand idle as the killing continues at this point?
I very much hope not. Of course, this news is incredibly worrisome. It is worrisome to us, and I'm sure it is worrisome to any Western government that is watching what's happening in Syria. But we very much hope that at the same time, Syrian civilians would not become hostage to declarations, but by one of the fighting groups. If anything, I think that should be yet another signal to Western countries to extend and expand their support of reasonable groups, of the secular Syrian opposition that has nothing to do with such radical groups as Al-Nusra.
What do you mean? What do you mean by support reasonable groups? How should they support them?
Well, I think, of course, the groups themselves are requesting military support. This is not something that we can possibly recommend as a human rights organization. But there are many other ways to empower these groups and not the groups, the more radical ones. For example, they're now building civilian infrastructure. They're building courts. They're building civilian consuls on the territories that are currently under opposition control. And this is something that they need support with. This is something that they need training with. And this is something they're constantly asking our help and the Western help with. Another issue is, of course, humanitarian assistance. As we have heard repeatedly from the United Nations, the humanitarian situation in these areas is dire. And this is exactly what we're seeing on the ground, which means that that Western support is absolutely necessary. And it's very clear that with all sorts of support, if it doesn't come from the West, it will eventually come from somebody else. And whoever provides this support might eventually have an upper hand in how this conflict develops.
Rania Abouzeid, your reaction to what Neistat has just said. We've also had the word from the U.S. Secretary of State when he was speaking to people from the Syrian opposition in London on Wednesday, saying, "Look, we're not sure whether if we send you weapons, if they won't get into the wrong hands." What's your prediction on what's going to happen now?
Well, you know, as Anna said, it makes it certainly more difficult for Western governments that may have been looking to support the rebels. However, having said that, you know, as she also said, if they don't get support from the West, they're going to get it from somewhere else. We're talking about 2 years into a conflict where now we're seeing triple-digit daily death tolls. There are MiGs in the air. You know, people are very angry about the fact that the West has, in their mind, done nothing to assist them. And then we see this group, Jabhat al-Nusra, which is one of the more effective fighting groups on the ground. Their men are on the front line, shedding their blood to try and, you know, help these civilians. I've heard rebel commanders, secular rebel commanders, say that they'll take help from anybody. They need them now, but afterwards, i.e. after the fall of the regime, then they'll deal with their ideologies. You know, there has long been talk about a revolution after the revolution, about fights after the fall of the regime. At the moment, all of the various groups, their guns are more or less pointed in the same direction towards the regime. However, after that, then we're going to see the you know, if and when the regime falls, then we're going to see all of these major differences sort of being played up.
Abdel Bari Atwan, why do you think that this announcement, this pledge of allegiance to Al-Qaeda, which many say is just a brand nowadays, not even an actual top-down organization. Why was this Pledge of Allegiance made, in your view?
Well, actually, first, to differentiate themselves from the secular groups who are fighting the Syrian regime. Second, they want to enjoy the fame of Al-Qaeda, which is extremely fearful when it comes to the West and the United States in particular. So the message is very clear. They are saying to the American, okay, you consider us a terrorist organization. We are here to stay. We will answer you back by joining Al-Qaeda or buying actually to work under the brand of Al-Qaeda, and we are not ashamed of that. So it is very critical timing, and they know that Al-Qaeda is extremely stronger than it used to be before 11th of September. So Al-Qaeda is a huge umbrella. It has branches in Yemen, branches in Somalia, branches in North Africa, branches in the Sahel in Mali, branches in Iraq, branches in Afghanistan. So they are joining a large umbrella. They will say, we are not isolated here. We are part of Al-Qaeda franchises. So, and we are going to fight you in later stages. Now we are busy with the Assad regime. After that, we will continue the same path of Osama bin Laden, the same path of Ayman al-Zawahiri. So it is a very, very strong message. And actually, it is actually some sort of a challenge to the West and the United States, who consider Al-Nusra as a terrorist organization.
And every Western nation, by the way, has its own jihadists. In the case of France, some have turned up in Pakistan, in Mali, and Syria. Newspaper Le Monde spoke to one ministerial advisor who says that there are 90 French nationals estimated to have links with Syrian jihadist groups. Among them, one must distinguish between those who've been to see there what's going on, those who are offering logistical support, and those who are seeking contact with battle-hardened fighters. So each Western capital, be it London, Paris, is worried about its own citizens going. So again, it begs the question, and Pierre Berthelot, how do you handle these jihadists if you're in the West?
Well, it's, of course, a danger for Western countries. They're afraid that after military fighting in Syria or in other countries in the world, Islamic countries, they can come back in France or in other countries, of course, to promote jihad, or like was Mohamed Merah, for instance, last year in Toulouse. He was... we know in Afghanistan.
And he went to the tribal regions of Pakistan and Afghanistan.
Exactly. So there is a danger.
When you hear Anna Neistat's recipes for how to shore up the opposition without sending guns to the wrong people, do you think that will help weaken the likes of Jabhat al-Nusra?
Well, it's a difficult question. I think there is a stalemate, both for the government, for Assad government, and for the opposition. Of course, if we don't provide, we don't supply with weapons, it will promote the Islamist jihadists, the more radicals fighters. We know that, and what Assad hopes, maybe. But on the other hand, as I said previously, the opposition is not united. We can't, it's a dilemma. We can't provide, West can't provide the opposition with weapons, and especially the Free Syrian Army, as it is not united. So there is a stalemate, and for Assad too. So there's not a simple solution to this difficult crisis.
No simple solution. What's interesting were the remarks made in London. Last month, ahead of a Brussels summit, the French president openly called for the easing of the arms embargo for Syria's rebels. The British at the time seemed to concur. 2 weeks later, Paris backtracked. This was what the UK Foreign Secretary had to say at this Thursday's G8 conference.
We are concerned that Syria is now the #1 destination for jihadists in the world. We are concerned about the the growth of extremist groups. We've stressed in our meetings with them, my French and American colleagues and I have stressed in the meetings we had with them yesterday, how very important it is that any help we give them today or in the future cannot be diverted to extremist groups or end up in the wrong hands.
Rania, Abouzeid, were you surprised last month to hear the French talking about arming the rebels? And what do you think about the fact that they've done such a quick about-face on this?
No, it's not surprising, especially, you know, what was surprising for me this week is the fact that Jabhat al-Nusra and the Islamic State of Iraq actually said something which many of us suspected anyway, but we couldn't get confirmation of. Why, you know, why make this declaration now when the French were considering lifting the EU arms embargo, for example? I don't have an answer to that, but it's certainly a question that needs to be asked.
For 2 years, there's been an uprising in Syria, and for 2 years, Syria's president has been prophesizing a conflict taken over by foreign-led terrorists.
With whom are we dealing? People with extremist ideas who only believe in the language of blood, killing and terrorism. Shall we have dialogue with gangs conspiring with the outside and follow the orders of strangers?
Elias, Warde, does this announcement, this allegiance to Al-Qaeda, make Assad stronger?
I think Assad make Legion Al-Qaeda and Jabhat al-Nusra stronger, and also the
how so?
Because in the repression that he practiced during these last 2 years, he selected Sunnit, for instance, Muslims, to be killed. I can give you some statistics. For instance, Arabic Sunnit are about 60% in Syria, while martyrs in Syria are from this community are about 19%. So it's not proportional, I mean, to this repartition of all
He's
the
deliberately
others
trying to make it a sectarian.
So yes, the regime chose from the beginning to show this revolution as an extremist and a jihadist revolution in order, of course, to win the Occident position for him. And of course, he always has been assured from Iran position and from Russia position. On the other side, I think it is regrettable, really. It's ununderstandable why Occident make this fault. I think there are fault for the Syrian revolution in this in the waiting up to now to don't help the democratic and opposition in Syria.
What, by arming the rebels?
Yes. Yes, even with weapons. But also, I can...
Even though, as John Kerry said, they could get in the wrong hands.
I would just to say this, please. Let me finish this. Even without weapons, as a scientific, I know now that electronically we can make the aviation of Assad army to be stopped completely, just with used radar.
Scramble the radars,
yes,
for instance,
yes,
and
from OTAN bases
from
in
NATO
Turkey,
bases in Turkey,
and from Mediterranean,
right,
without sending any soldier
weapons
and without weapons. Why they didn't do this up to now? Why we didn't ask armies? We didn't ask weapons. I just would ask to all free people in this world, especially the Western states, who states all time that they are friends of Syrian people. Why didn't they do this? Why up to now? Right, it is sufficient if the planes of
If you scramble the radars, you'll keep the planes on the ground.
It's easy to do this. Why?
Neistat, you put out this report which shows about the aerial bombardments targeting civilians specifically, you claim. Is it a question you've asked yourself as well? Why haven't they scrambled the radars, for instance?
Absolutely. I think it's a very important question to ask. Why hasn't the international community done more to this day? When you witness the kind of slaughter of civilian population that we have been seeing in Syria, and that especially intensified since August when the airstrikes began, one can but wonder how long the international community could watch that. I mean, there are pretty good answers probably for that, and obviously strong action is being blocked in the Security Council by Russia and China. Russia continues to support Assad's regime, both politically and militarily. But I think it's very important to remember that it may not be too late to change these dynamics, and it's definitely high time for international community to act. Right. I can just very quickly quote you a doctor to whom I spoke in one of the hospitals in Aleppo, who basically was very critical, specifically of President Obama. I think, I don't know if he was aware of al-Nusra's declaration, but he definitely said, look, we now have this group in Aleppo, and of course they're getting more powerful, but at this point we can still deal with them. We can handle it ourselves. And he's a very secular, reasonable man, a surgeon in the hospital. But if this continues, if this slaughter of civilians continues with the world watching from outside and doing nothing, 6 months from now there would be nothing we can do against those radicals. And this is the message from people who are inside this. And I think this is the message that the world needs to hear loud and clear.
All right. I want to thank you for that, Neistat, there at the border between Turkey and Syria. Also want to thank Rania Abouzeid for joining us from Beirut. Her piece from Inside Syria is in Time magazine. Abdel Bari Atwan, whose editorial on Al-Qaeda's bid for Syria is in Al-Quds al-Arabi this Thursday, and also with us here in the studio, Pierre Berthelot and Elias Warde. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.